Hello, everyone. Hopefully you're streaming in now to the session. So welcome to Ensuring Governance Continuity. This is our Co-op Directors Virtual Forum. And my name is Courtney Berner. I'm the Executive Director of the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives. And it's really my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual forum. So as many of you probably know, we typically hold an annual directors forum in December in person. And like many of you, we have pivoted and changed plans in 2020. And so now we are offering these virtual forums online, or these forums online, and we're doing 2 in December. And this first is, again, ensuring governance continuity. So one of the silver linings of virtual format is that instead of just having directors from the state of Wisconsin, these online sessions have attracted directors from all over the country and the region. So it's a great opportunity to share with peers, not just in our state, but again, across the country. So we are going to have, I'm going to do a little housekeeping. Kyle, if I could get the next slide. So we have 3 speakers who are all seasoned co-op directors. Each will share their experience with this topic for 10 to 15 minutes. And the session will run for about 90 minutes. After the presentations, we will pause to address questions from the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat box at any time, and we will be pulling those questions and asking them of the speakers after their presentations. Then at the end of the session, we will have some short breakout groups with about 4 to 5 people in them, just as a chance to meet and network with other directors, as well as sharing some thoughts and experiences on the topic and the speakers. And then we'll come back at the end for a quick reconvening before we break at noon Central Time. So a little bit about UW Center for Cooperatives. We are based here at UW-Madison. We do outreach, research, and education on the cooperative business model. We also have a robust cooperative development program that helps people from across the state to start new cooperatives in a wide variety of sectors. So we began these semi-annual director forums in 2015 and have a long-time partnership with Cooperative Network on delivering these peer learning opportunities. So with that, I would like to turn over the mic, hand things off for a minute to Kristin Olsen from Cooperative Network, who will tell you a little bit about her organization.
Thank you, Courtney, and welcome everybody and good morning. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Cooperative Network, although I do see a lot of familiar names on the screen, we're a trade association representing cooperatives throughout Wisconsin and Minnesota in the halls of government. And it's no secret, and of course it's an understatement, that this year has presented a lot of challenges, and it's been unfortunate with the coronavirus pandemic. But the challenges of the past year have really made it evident that there really is no substitute for cooperative representation during a crisis, as well as throughout the more normal times. So it's our privilege to be able to represent co-ops of all different sizes and sectors in the halls of government, both in Wisconsin, Minnesota level as well. And we've been able to mention pivot. I think pivot is the word of 2020 when it comes to organizations. We've pivoted as well to a lot of virtual education programming such as this one today. So we have a lot on our schedule in the next few months in the first quarter of 2020. So you can visit cooperativenetwork.coop to learn more about those educational offerings. Most, if not all of them, are free of charge to our members. So be sure to check that out and visit our website for more details on our organization. Turn it back over.
Thank you so much for being here, Kristin. Really appreciate you being here, and of course the work that Cooperative Network has done this year and does all the time on behalf of our cooperative community. So before we dive into the content, I want to do a couple of polls just to get a better handle on who is in the room. So the first question is, what sector best describes your cooperative? So please take a second to respond. We have a big tent. The cooperative tent is large and wide in Wisconsin and nationally, and so it's always fun to see who we have represented. All right, so I'll let it go for another minute or so, not quite a minute. We've got dead heat here between grocery and agriculture. All right. Oli says, no worker co-op. That's not necessarily a sector. There's I guess there's not manufacturing on there. Sorry, Oli. All right, so 3, 2, 1, I'm gonna end the poll. So we have 6 agricultural cooperatives, 6 grocery, 3 healthcare, 3 housing, 2 rural electrics, 3 credit unions, arts and crafts, and then 12 in the other. So I'd be curious to know. What those others are. Oli, I'm guessing you ended up in that one. All right, so the next question is, let me see if I can do this next poll. Stop sharing poll. Don't want to read. Stop sharing. Aha, there we go. Next question. How long have you served as a co-op director? This is one of the things that I think is really fun about these forums, in addition to having really interesting sort of cross-sectoral representation. We also end up with a lot of new directors and directors who are long tenured. They may have been serving on their boards for 10, 15, 20 years. So it looks like, again, we have a really great cross-section of experience. I'll give it another couple seconds. So cast your vote. 3, 2, 1. All right, so we have new board members winning, but after that is more directors with more than 10 years. So, and then there's an interesting sort of spread across the middle. So thank you so much for taking the polls. It's always fun for us to see, get a little bit more information about who's in the room. So, without further ado, I'd like to move on to introducing our presenters. So we have 3 directors today who are sharing their expertise with you, and all of them have a great deal of experience serving on cooperative boards, and I am excited to hear what they have to say, and I think you will learn a lot from them. So what I'll do is I'll introduce our first speaker, Ann Hoyt. She'll give some remarks, then I will introduce Steve, and then he'll give some remarks, and then I will we'll wrap things up with Emily, and then we'll open it for questions. But do feel free to enter your questions as folks in the chat box. We will be capturing those. So our first speaker is Ann Hoyt. Ann is an emerita professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and was a consumer cooperative specialist here with a focus on cooperative governance. She's currently a BUDS person at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So the board chair of Group Health Cooperative of South Central Wisconsin, and the vice president of the Willie Street Grocery Cooperative in Madison. She's also served on UW Credit Union's board for quite some time, though she's no longer serving. So she has a wide range of cooperative experience. So Ann, if you could go ahead and turn on your video and your mic, I will hand things over to you for about 10 minutes or so to share your thoughts on the topic of ensuring governance continuity.
Thank you, Courtney. It's a pleasure to be here and to see the wide variety of cooperatives that are workshop and also some other healthcare co-ops people. I represent in this meeting the consumer cooperative HMO, that's Group Health Cooperative of South Central Wisconsin. We provide health insurance and primary care to 7,000 members. We have a board of 11 directors, 9 are co-op members who are by the members, and 2 are provider members, and they are recommended to us by the providers, and then the board approves those recommendations. We don't have minutes on this board, and I'll be discussing our board turnover that in recent times later on. We were founded 44 years ago by a group of people in Madison who thought consumers of health should own and govern the way that healthcare is organized and delivered. That may sound familiar to you. And they bring a new emphasis on preventive healthcare and cost control, which at that time and even was when the established medical care system was areas for high medical costs and provider control. I'm a member of Group Health for 35 years, and I'm in my as a director. A little bit of board history to give you a sense of where we were in terms of board continuity. By 2014, the co-op had gone through several years of losses, which amounted to several millions, actually, of dollars. And co-op members were concerned. Operators in Madison, who are also members of Group Health, and they got together and eventually, after much discussion, organized a slate of 3 directors to run for the board, and that way get a strong member's voice about our concerns to management. The slate was elected, and on the same night that the election results were provided, the CEO resigned from his position. So we had 3 new directors and an interim CEO when the 3 of us that were elected. All of the previous board members but 1 have been replaced. So we essentially have an almost entirely new board of directors there. And this has happened to a board that had relatively little turnover and directors that had been in office for decades. Amazingly, I think I became chair the year after I was elected, and I had to think a lot about board continuity and what is it? And for me, it means that there is a system in place that guarantees sustainable and predictable governance, particularly through periods of change. And that means that the board is for oversight, strategy, decision-making, relation to the manager and CEO, and succession planning continue no matter who's on the board, even though the content that's embedded in those processes may change over time. And I see it, board continuity is dependent on 4 key factors: strong board processes, there's conscious director succession planning, there's a well-designed election process, and there's provisions for continuous director development, beginning with a robust orientation process for new directors. Of course, each of these are big topics, worthy of entire workshops on their own, but I'll try to share some thoughts on each one. So before anything else, you consider anything else about board continuity in mind, it's important to develop strong policies of management. You are being the nature of the board's relationship with management and the ways the board will operate and its expectations of itself. It's also a plan in place and to work to develop a commonly understood decision-making process with all board members and is committed to making decisions. Fundamentally, I think the housekeeping and board continuity is to get obviously your processes and your methods straight and reasonable and on paper. Second, it's important to do director strategic or succession planning, to avoid the stagnation and complacency, sometimes infect boards that have limited board turnover, to expect and want some change in the directors over time. Plan a way for the directors to retire, as it were, and that how you will incorporate new directors. Term limits are the most straightforward plan to know when directors will be leaving and you will be needing to replace them. I find in all the boards I've been on that directors, particularly that serve long terms, which I did many times, hesitate to retire, and they kind of leave it up to chance that one day, but what day we don't know, and hopefully it won't be a day when they're forced to retire with very short notice. So I have been on boards that decided that in order to know something about when people might be retiring, that each year, each director would state for the record in what year they expected to retire, so that at least there was an ability to plan for that. And then, of course, just wait to see if somebody gets replaced, like to happen at Group Health. So at that point, it's important to do some planning about upcoming elections to some level of continuity and also the strength of the board. So I think that it's really important that every board seat have at least 2 people running for that seat. Or if 3 people are up for election, at least 6 people are running, so that the board have a chance to actually directors they think will be best for the organization. In addition, it helps if the board has every couple of years has thought about their performance and done a self-assessment, in particular to look at what their current needs are and how those needs might be filled, given who they think might be going off the board, or that conditions are changing and you might need different expertise. Board. Right now, I would predict that many of us would like to have someone on the board that understands cybersecurity, contingency planning, or even diversity, equity, and inclusion experience. Or you may want to find someone that actually has extensive co-op experience. You may have lost that over time, or government experience. And once needs are identified, then the recruitment process can focus on those needs and express, a preference for example, someone with a cybersecurity experience, or the board can, or the nominating committee can look for people that have that. Finally, once you have the election, and assuming you may have a new director in place, it goes without saying that a comprehensive organization plan should be in place. That includes the co-op's history, the processes we talked about, the policies, review of the primary product lines, and so forth. And when developing an orientation plan, it may be helpful for the board to have a discussion of what they think a new director needs to know. There are other suggestions for how to orient new directors, but I think I'll stop here and just review that. I think successful board continuity is dependent on those 4 key factors: strong board processes, director succession planning, a well-designed election process, continuous director development, and beginning that with a robust orientation process for new directors. Thank you for listening to my ideas, and I look forward to the other presentations.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. You have such a wealth of experience in this area, and I really appreciate you sharing it with our guests today. So our next speaker is Steve Schlangen. Steve is the chairman of Associated Milk Producers Incorporated. You may know it as AMPI, which is the cooperative based here in the United States. He also serves on the National Milk Producers Federation Board. His wife Cheryl milk 65 Holsteins, robotic milker on their farm near Albany in central Minnesota. They raise all the feed for their cows and replacement heifers on their own 200 acres. So Steve, I will invite you to turn on your camera and your mic and to share your thoughts with our group.
Good morning. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, like Courtney said, I'm Steve Schlangen. I'm a dairy farmer from Albany, Minnesota. Currently chairman of the board of directors of Associated Milk Producers Incorporated. And we're a regional dairy cooperative. Our main office is in New Ulm, Minnesota. And we're owned by dairy farm families from the upper Midwest of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. So together our the upper Midwest, where we process a little over 5 billion pounds of milk per year and have sales of approximately $1.7 billion worth of dairy products per year. We have 5 cheese plants. 4 of those are the 3 million pound a day cheese plant, pretty good size, pretty efficient plant. 1 powder plant in South Dakota, packaging plant in New Ulm, Minnesota, a consumer packaging plant for processed cheese and food service items for like shredded cheese for food service. And that's in Portage, Wisconsin, just a ways north of Madison. So we make cheese, butter, powder, and protein for customers across the country, even some around the world. And just became the largest US owned cheese co-op in the United States. So we make about 10% of the cheese, about 10% of the processed cheese, which is what you generally find on cheeseburgers at your fast food restaurants, and about 10% of the butter. So in our plants, we make 640 pound blocks and 500 pound barrels. And then we do have a small cheese plant in Hoven, South Dakota, where we make 22 pound wheels of Parmesan, Asiago, and style cheeses. And that taken first place National Milk Producers Annual Cheese Contest. So there's a lot of pride going into making products at AMPI. Our other plants primarily make cheddar, whether it be medium or sharp. Pretty good amount of pepper jack, different Monterey Jack, Colby Jack, different types of other cheeses, mostly for private customers like Great Lakes Cheese, Galleries, Marathon, and some companies might recognize, or some brands where you would find our Crystal Farms or Sargento. Our secondary plant in Portage, Wisconsin, make that processed treat cheese and package a lot of shreds for people like Cisco. Burger King is a pretty big customer of ours, Domino's. And so yeah, if you've had gone to those places, there's a good chance that you've probably had some of our cheese. Our butter plant is in New Ulm, and we generally make a lot of quart solids and whipped tubs, and so the cups that they use in restaurants. And there our main customers would be Cisco, Publix, Quick Trip is a customer of ours, and Dinner Bell is our own brand that we just recently launched, and you'll see that around more. And then we do a lot of private label butter for a lot of different. So most of our product goes to the East Coast, but we have a lot of product that gets sold in the upper Midwest also. We do have a few customers overseas. We recently got a deal with Orange Cheese China, and they business over there in Shanghai. So they're starting to enjoy more cheese on their over there in China. So part of making the cheese and butter this year for the Farmers to Families food box program, that was part of the whole coronavirus relief package. So our co-op is made of about 1,500 member farms from the upper Midwest. We have a network of elected officials. We have a level of delegates who are elected annually, and they are in charge of approving changes and bylaw changes and things like that. And we generally have one delegate for every 50 farms or so. We have two levels of directors, corporate directors, and we have divisional directors. And those are based on the size of the corporate board. For us right now is 18 members. We have 3 divisional directors to fill for each corporate director seat, so that's where the corporate directors are elected from, is divisional directors group. And that group has generally brought more information and is more on board with everything that's going on. We have turnover on the corporate board. So across our co-op, we have 6 different divisions, and we allocate depending on, as sellouts happen and things change, we have to sometimes reorganize things to make sure they're kind of all equal as far as membership and things like that. So we have 2 of those divisions are up for election every year for 3-year terms, which means that 1/3 of our board gets and those divisions then are divided into districts. And so that's where the process starts at our district meetings in fall. And districts could be anywhere 50 to 100 farms, and we try to keep them big enough to make it worthwhile getting a meeting together, getting people to run for offices and officials positions. But you don't want them too big either. You want them fairly balanced. So delegates elected every year at the district meeting. Divisional directors would be elected every 3rd year at the district meeting. And then the corporate directors would then come from the round of directors that are elected. So we at AMPI, but if once you turn 5 years old, you cannot start a new term. You can finish your term that you're in. And generally, we don't have a lot of turnover. We've had maybe more in the last few years just because of sellouts and then some retirements. But and if you sell out, you can be on the board. You have to be a dairy farmer in order to be on this board of directors. So AMPI, we just as years in business. We started in 19, and we actually came together over all those years as a lot of others merging together to trying to figure out ways to work better together for our dairy farmers across the upper Midwest. I myself started farming on my own in 86, and then I interested in the co-op and the governance a little bit. I attended my first district meeting in the fall of 1991, and once you know it, I was elected as a delegate. And then about 6 years later, I was a delegate for, and then I ran for divisional director in 1997, and I got that position. And by 2000, then I was able to run for the corporate board, and I was elected to the corporate board in 2000. Been on the corporate board. This is, I believe, my 20th year, and I was elected chairman in 2010. So it's been 10 years for that part. So when you talk about governance continuity, I think that's something as a board you kind of got to think about every day, continually work on kind of some processes of bringing people up to serve on the board, and hopefully allow the an openness that they would feel like they're welcome to want to serve on the board. We have a really good YC program, or Young Cooperator MPI. It's for families are 40 years old and younger. If one of the spouses is 40 years old and younger, they're able to be part of that. They actually have their own steering committee, their own budget. So they elect officers, and they really run the program themselves. And then the board to request their budget to run their programs. So it's a great for them to get involved and learn more about our plan in the country, and just how AMPI works, the business of it, and then also dairy farms around the upper Midwest. And it's a great way for kids a lot of times when we have events throughout the year. And they really enjoy networking with others that are in the same situation as they are on the farm, and with their families and everything. We also include a pretty good group program along with our annual meeting. As far as other elected officials, we do have divisional meetings twice a year, and that would be for all delegates and all the directors, just to get them up to date on the business and what's going on in the co-op and how we're doing financially. And then the divisional directors actually have one more event usually during the year, and that'll probably coincide with a corporate board meeting. And it would be a planning session or some kind of training that we bring them in to have them more up to speed. If if there's an opening, that one of them would be ready to fill that in. So it's really a constant work in progress, getting information to people, and to get them a little more involved at every level. We do now have a text and email system. I forget what it's called. It's My MPI or something like that, to give timely information. So if we have any notifications or any information we want to get out to our members, and especially our elected officials, they can be signed up for this, and they can get a text or an email that will send them to a link or something that they can get information that we think is important for them. We have iPads on our board members, and we use the onboard for that. We can get all kinds of financial information over that, industry information, co-op information that we can send out before meetings, between meetings, or whenever it's important to get that information out to our board members. And so generally our board just meets between 10 to 12 times per year, kind of monthly most of the time, but sometimes in spring and fall with field work, we try to schedule things so farmers can get their work done also. So and then we have an annual meeting generally once a year down in the Twin Cities. It's kind of the center of our. Just a bit more information after hearing that the first speaker, Ann, talk about her group health co-op. I was on the startup board, 40 Square Cooperative Solutions Health Insurance Co-op that is up and running now in Minnesota. So it's interesting to be involved in that. And that's pretty much wraps up what I have.
A great segue. Yeah, once you're part of the co-op community, you can't get out. There's all sorts of ways to be involved. So thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciated your presentation and your perspective. to introduce Emily Anderson, third and final presenter for the webinar. Emily serves on the board of the Twin Cities Co-op Partners. And you may not have heard of TCCP because it's relatively new. It's a Minneapolis consumer-owned cooperative made up of Co-op Partners Warehouse and 2 neighborhood grocery cooperatives, the Wedge and Linden Hills. Prior to the formation of this, she was a Wedge board member for 4 years. Emily was a sales and marketing manager for 13 years in a worker-owned cooperative, and from 1999 to 2001, provided board development assistance for the 40 small business members of Cooperative Mercado Central. She worked with a team to establish the Minneapolis Co-op Tech for the city of Minneapolis and continues to teach in those CTAP classes. So Emily has a wide-ranging cooperative background and lots of interesting experience with cooperatives from different sectors and membership types. So Emily, I will welcome or invite you to turn on your camera and your microphone and start your presentation.
I'm looking for the video. I have my
start video. I just sent you a message saying ask to start video. Does that pop something up for you?
Got it.
Great.
Okay. I'm set.
All right, you're on.
Thanks, Courtney. As Courtney said, I'm on the board of the Twin Cities Co-op Partners and TCCP. Consumer Co-op Grocery has 22,000 active members. What we consider an active member is someone who's has shopped within the mission is to build community by creating a strong local food. In 2017 was when we created the Twin Cities Co-op Partners by consolidating the Wedge with Linden Hills Co-op. And each brought more than 4 decades of experience connecting people to local growers, suppliers, farmers, and producers. Seeing that all 3 of us are in 50 years old, those versions. Our retail groceries, our 2 retail groceries, Wedge and Linden Hills, offer produce, grocery, meat, health and body care, and also bakery, commissary, and catering. Our stores may best be known for our reliably well-stocked and local and sustainably grown produce, which our Co-op Partners Warehouse is responsible for. We've had historically Wedge had historic healthy sales per square foot, steady growth and high contributes to that freshness, perishable product too, and helps to boost sales for groceries. Our co-op affordability program supports the option for people to become members by paying for their membership over time. Services we provide to members are quarterly newsletter, delivery. Well, shopper can get Instacart delivery, and also the more recently added TCCP also provides wholesale distribution through the Co-op Partners Warehouse in Paul, and it primarily focuses on organic produce, but also sells some other food products, grocery products, to obviously our co-op retails, the greater Minneapolis St. co-ops and also restaurants. And as well, co-ops and restaurants along routes west into North Dakota, south into Iowa, north as far as Grand Marais, Minnesota, east to Milwaukee and Chicago, and parts in between. The co-op warehouse support retails, many other weekly produce newsletters. Oh, and the other thing, besides delivering for local farmers, we get as much local produce as we can during the season. And when our local producers are busiest of local farming, organic farming particularly, or sustainable farming, providing a service called cross-docking. We offer to new farms that are not producing enough to sell us product that will be stored in the warehouse, but they're in a smaller scale. And what we do is take their product onto our dock. It never actually gets tallied into our storage. They have already packed it for customers along our delivery routes. So when we fill the truck, we add those boxes for the cross-dock partners onto our semi. So my wedge membership began in 1997, and my board service from 2015. I was reelected to the TCCP board after consolidation. From 1974 to I was a member of the Seward Co-op, also in Minneapolis, and also spent owner of a produce wholesaler to co-ops for 13 years and was sales and marketing manager for several. So in that way, in those years, I became very familiar with the retail co-ops in order to be able to sell to them. The TCCP board has 9 members. Each member has a 3-year term. We can, board members can run again for 2 more. You can end up having 3 3-year terms if you get reelected. 7 members. We had 7 members at the point of consolidation, but in our bylaw allowed for 7 to 9 members. And we, in each of the last 2 years, we added 1 member. Reasons we wanted to look for additional, and we have we're building a robust diversity, equity, and accessibility direction or program, and that was so part of the larger board provided an opportunity to bring it. So we added 1 member in each of the past 2 cycles. So now we have 9. We have 3 open seats this year because we have a staggered cycle. The board recruits, interviews, and presents a slate to members, a slate of candidates. And I'm with Anne on the passion for having a minimum of 2 candidates for each open seat. People don't, it's not very exciting for members to vote in an election when there's 3 people for 3 open seats or something similar. Boards, let's see, all members are elected at large by the members. We have rarely had, and this is going back to the wedge, actually, as far as I know it, when I started there, we rarely have had a resignation during a fiscal year. Members have occasionally chosen 3-year terms, but rarely one. And have our members have a history of supporting incumbents, which is another reason for us to increase the number of opportunities. In terms of ensuring governance continuity, our goal is to have each board member serve 9 years, 3-year terms. And there's 3 parts in my mind to think about in terms of supporting governance continuity. And the first begins with recruitment. Actually, to make sure that we provide within the interview and then in conversation, phone, or in printed materials, to every candidate, whether they make it to the site or not, learns about the board, making sure that they know what the purpose of the board is. We do a comparison with nonprofit and for-profit boards and highlight the difference of a for-profit board. They learn to know the legal requirements. We make it clear what the time commitment is required and the stipend that they receive and their opportunity for development. We make clear the I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. We let people know what the meeting cadence is, the officers, the committees, and how we make decisions. And how the board has a primary responsibility in relationship with this hiring and supervising the CEO, and to sustain co-op performance, to make sure that the co-op has the ability to keep going. Also, we let people know our key initiatives, like, for instance, now in a recent election, we did talk about our diversity, equity, inclusion program, and what exactly that plan entails, and also the expectation for each member to participate, beginning with an IDI, individual diversity inquiry survey, that's given. We talk about what our goals are in relation to, where we are on the spectrum of emphasizing just survival or recovery, and a clarity about understanding in an ongoing way what the board's role is in relationship to the management's role. We talk about decision-making style and practices, and let me see. Yeah, the things we cover within the recruitment and interviews. We've been really to get more candidates, and have been a little bit more too successful in a way. There are many disappointed people that don't make it to the slate, but we still have like 3 people for each open seat. And I think it is important. I mean, in reviewing all the candidates, having been on the nominations committee a few times, we definitely get the best candidates, the applicants, when we form the slate. And there's diverse backgrounds and age groups and experience, whether it be with R&D or other industries, and built our boards with a lot more expertise than years ago in this sector. And then after the election, before this meeting, and be what you think of as the onboarding or orientation. Our goal, one of our goals is, our main goal, board member is supported and prepared to participate from the very first meeting. So we listen to their questions and recommendations about the board. This includes, I guess this includes the after the election and meeting. We encourage participation, especially with questions right from the outset, and welcome them. And every board member knows this, and will be very welcoming. At the first meeting, they sign a conflict of interest statement. Why that would be valuable. They receive board member contact information. They learn about the committee charters. Each board member is required to participate on at least one committee. And we have every committee do participate at every meeting with what we call a lightning round. So not every meeting includes a report from every committee, but at least a 5-minute or 2-minute about what they're still working on. They learn about the meeting cadence and the committee calendars, charters, and of course the important review of our CEO. They find where to find, they know records and documents, and I think it's important to have, this is important in terms of you cannot, no matter what you do, you can't really offload a history of a call that's any more than 3 years old, I think. So clear records, I think, is really good for new members. They also receive a tour of our retails and warehouse, and they learn about the we have made. And the first meeting and beyond are introduced, the new board members are introduced to the other board members, board officers, CEO and CFO. And they we just changed one change. It seems so obvious that this was a good change, but we used to, in the initial meeting for the year where the new members started, we had officer election and committee assignments. So it was a little bit chaotic, and it was always strange for new board members to be voting on an officer, a choice between two people who want to be officers, even if they listen to an introduction from each of them. When they've just met them and this is their first day on the boards. We altered that, so we're the board in a couple months before the new board members will be joining us is identifying officers. So the officer roles are, and so in the first meeting we trade on describing committees and talking about who wants on what committee.
We are
and then we
at time, Emily, so I'm gonna ask you
Okay.
to
Okay.
wrap it. If you have a final thought you want to share that.
Okay, that's it. I check after the first meeting, we do a board self-review. relationship with the CEO is essential to new board members, and the relationship and presentation by operational leaders.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So now if I could ask all of the speakers to turn on their cameras and microphones, and while that is happening, please go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and I will kick it off with a question, and you'll ask some questions in chat, and Kelly will go over the facilitating questions from there. So the first one I have, if we think about board continuity, we often talk about the specific information or knowledge that needs to be passed on to new directors. But in my opinion, equally, if the culture of the board and sort of how that culture of the themselves as members are flowing in and out. Strategies have your co-ops used to support continuity, especially in the last year when meeting person has been limited? So anyone can take that first.
It's not an easy question. It's really hard, I think, to onboard new board members when we're meeting virtually. And when we're talking with them one-on-one, really hard. There's something about getting together, coffee or something, and talking with people that you're much more open, I think, about how the board operates, how it got to be where it was or is, those kinds of things that we do informally. So other than that, I don't have a real good answer for your question. You know, we don't have a formal way to talk about that.
Yeah, we struggle in the same way and continually that we can't get together for coffee. And
I would just say, I think to get the members or to kind of on the same page with that, I think it's really along as elected officials for a long time and sharing information with them, allowing them to have input on what their expectations are with the co-op and with the board and with management, and really communicating with them and making them feel like they can really ask any question. You will get them the answer they're looking for, whether we do it right away or follow up later. But I think your culture is just bringing that along is just part of the organization that you have to do constantly. And it is definitely now with doing virtual meetings. We actually even canceled all of our divisional meetings because they were in-person meetings, and you know, with the rules and stuff, we can't get together for those at this time. But it's kind of interesting that I get calls from producers and all they really want to do is talk, because they aren't getting together with us on a timely basis like we normally did, and they kind of miss that part of it. So I guess that's how I would look at how we kind of keep our culture going on our board, is to do it all the way through the co-op with all the members and all the elected officials. And we try to do it all the time.
Great, thanks. I'm gonna go away for a little bit and hand it over to Kelly.
So we have a few questions coming in from the chat. If you kind of different rules on term limits or not term limits in your co-op, and if, I mean, the co-ops are all very old, but if you know anything about how or why those term limits or not were established.
Well, I could maybe start on that one. We've never had term limits, and we've always had an age limit for directors and corporate directors, even though if you want to be a delegate, you can be a delegate until you really don't want to anymore. So a lot of this It started that way, and it's continuing to be that way. And over time, those are things I think that because as to be involved in an elected official, it's sometimes challenging positions, and you really directors just because their time is up. I think if they're not doing a good job, the election probably should take care of that by itself. But that's just my opinion, and that's just what we do at our.
And you might know as much as I do about how the original short term started. But I think that I found that recruitment different, and often there were just it wasn't as strongly persuasive, and was more like we need 3 board members, so who can we find that'll do that, and without having a critical process about who might be a good board member and why. And I think board members came and went because there was not as much clarity about the board's role. Often they were there was a phase where we were volunteers. That as the co-ops grew, the grocery co-ops grew larger and had bigger challenges, expansion and other financial challenges, and more options where to go with the business. It was clear that we needed more expertise. So I mean, not exactly answering your question, but I will say I'm guessing that the short terms had something to do with going from, relatively speaking, no terms to the people had, I guess, suspicion of long terms, not being able to get rid of a board member.
Any thoughts from you, Anne, on this top question?
If you can hear me, someone is in the room above me and dropping stuff all the time, so don't be shocked. But we don't have term limits at Group Health, and I have proposed to our board development committee that we establish a policy for term limits. There's nothing in our bylaws that says anything about it, and it's going very slowly. For people to think about being limited in their terms, I think, to be the first people to enact it. The easiest way to do that, I think, is to grandfather everybody in for the maximum amount. So, for example, I was suggesting 3 terms, and that anybody that was currently sitting on the board would start their 3-year terms once we pass the policy.
And particularly in your comments, you mentioned, the importance of a strategic planning process that participates in, and that helps keep information flowing. For all of you, are some members in that process? Is it only board and staff? How does that process?
The board members and operational leadership cooperate on strategic planning, and pre to starting or as part of the process of entering into strategic planning, we have had community forums, we have had member forums, member surveys. That would be the main things that we gather direct input from members.
go next, if that's okay. We generally have a strategic planning process that we go through every 3 to 5 years, probably. And when we do that, we've been bringing in our divisional directors along with directors. So you really have everybody who's on the board, anybody who's probably interested in getting on the board within the next 3 to 5 years or whatever, planning sessions. And I think it's a good time to network and for people to get their ideas put on paper and just to make them feel like they're part of this whole thing going forward. It'll be interesting now. I mean, this year has been really difficult because we did a lot of our meetings in person, but we have done a lot of them on Zoom now. And I know we have farmers out there that may be more interested in being on the board if we'd have Zoom meetings because it's hard to leave the farm in many cases. There'd be farmers that would really be good at being on the board and enjoy being part of it if they wouldn't have to find someone to take care of the farm when they're gone to a board meeting and different things. So it'll be interesting going forward how we balance that all and how we continue to meet to make sure our board and our members are satisfied with what we're doing.
Thanks. I'm going to ask one last question from the chat before we go into some breakout groups. Well, you talked about this a little bit, but that are being put on the slate for about their potential board responsibilities. Happen before the election? Is it something that happens afterwards?
Yeah, far before it. The election calendar starts in early part of the year, January. We review all the materials as a committee, nominations committee. By February, we're putting up or updating the website with what are the expectations of a board. We have a whole board page in the website. So very clear about what the board's job is and you know what goes on at level, how it relates to operations and how it isn't operations. Did that answer the question at all?
Yeah, Anne or Steve, any thoughts on that?
Could you run the question by me one more time?
Just if you have new folks on the board, how do they find out what their responsibilities would be before the election, or do they?
Well, and I think a lot of that is kind of shared with them over time as they are divisional directors and they are involved, you know, so we try to get them exposed to as much as we possibly can ahead of time. So they kind of can understand that there are certain things that you have a right to know as a board member. And I think as you elevate and get to the corporate board, you probably things expand, and probably if you get the executive committee, there might be more, you know, for you or officer group or whatever. But yeah, I think it happens over time, and I think people most we do an orientation on first get elected, but most of them pretty much know what they're getting into before they even open up an office.
I feel, can I just quick say, I failed to mention that in addition to the webpage, we also have that same information in the newsletters, in the store, at the customer service desk. And pre-COVID, we had tables in the stores where one or more members would be available to talk and persuade people to come over and chat with us a minute about board service. I asked them, do you know someone who would want to be on the board, rather than saying, do you want to be on the board, because then you get a better spread. But
great. Well, thank you, three We are going to do some breakout groups now. These are, I don't want to scare people. People stick with us. The point of these breakout groups is for folks to get a chance to talk a little bit with the other directors who are participating. We do, so introductions. I'm posting in the chat, hopefully. Is the chat going through now that my, can you all see the chat, or did that go away?
It just says go to the slide response to your Zoom group.
Okay, yeah, so I just posted a link in the chat so that everyone can click on this Google group. So in your group, quick introductions, if someone wants to volunteer to type and take a few notes. Part of this is just talking through how does your co-op handle governance continuity and board continuity. Are there any suggestions of things you heard today that you might take back to your board? We'll be kind of just looking at these things. These are things that are not going to be like shared publicly, but just a chance to capture a few ideas for when we close. And so Megan is going to assign folks breakout, and then we'll come back for a quick closure at the end after about 10 minutes or so.